Right, let's dive into this. The French Revolution, huge, right? We got timelines, overviews, even some stuff on women during all this craziness.
You know, it's wild. These sources, they really show a society just ready to implode. It's like dominoes, one thing leads to another, boom, total transformation.
Yeah, 18th century France,
Yeah.
not exactly a party. I mean, economic turmoil, inequality everywhere. You can just feel it's going to blow.
Oh, totally. And the fuse, it's the financial crisis, empty treasury. Thanks, Louis XVI. Seems he liked hunting and playing locksmith more than ruling, if these sources are right.
And don't forget, they helped out with the American Revolution, supporting freedom over there while things are falling apart at home. Recipe for, well, disaster.
Uh-huh. And it's not just numbers on a ledger, right? Real people are hurting. No food, bread prices through the roof. The flour wars, they called them. Paris is rioting.
Desperate times. Imagine being so hungry you're risking your neck for a loaf of bread.
Shows you the whole system is broken. The rulers and the ruled, that pact is shattered.
So, Louis, under pressure, he calls the Estates General. Kind of like their parliament, supposed to represent everybody. The clergy, the nobles, and the common folks, the Third Estate.
But there's a catch, right? The Third Estate, they're the majority, but their votes don't count for much. The other two, they always win.
Built-in inequality. And that becomes the revolution's focus. The Third Estate, they've been reading Enlightenment stuff, power to the people, individual rights. They want a voice.
And of course, the king, the nobles, they're not giving that up easily. Big clash brewing.
June 1789. Things get real. Third Estate's fed up. They just walk out, say, "We're the National Assembly now. We represent France." Bold move.
Definitely challenging the king's power right there, saying, it's not about the monarch, it's about the people. Radical stuff for those days. And it snowballs from there.
Fast forward a month. July 14th, 1789. Bastille Day. The event, the image that sums up the whole revolution.
Yeah, the Bastille, it was more than a prison. It was like the king's iron fist made physical. You could get locked up just because he felt like it.
No trial, nothing. So for the Parisians, taking that place wasn't just about freeing a few guys. It was about breaking tyranny itself.
Exactly. Huge crowd, all fire up. They just overrun the guards, take the whole fortress, then tear it down brick by brick. You can imagine blood everywhere.
A turning point. They showed the world, we the people have the power to destroy the old ways. And they celebrated it ever since.
Symbols matter. Bastille falls, it's a message. To all of France, to Europe, change is coming, whether they like it or not.
So after all that, the National Assembly writes the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Liberty, equality, fraternity, the big ideas. Sounds great on paper, but...
It's not so simple. Look closer. Who's missing from those rights? Women, slaves. Even the revolutionaries, their idea of equality had limits.
Yeah, even when you're trying to change everything, sometimes the old ways are just too strong. Shows you the fight for equality, it never really ends.
It's true. And that exclusion, it ignites a whole new debate. What does equality mean? What about women's rights? Figures like Olympe de Gouges emerge. She writes her own declaration just for women.
Things are getting complicated. And then, June 1791, Louis and his family, they try to sneak out of France, disguise themselves, the whole bit.
The flight to Varennes, they call it. Total PR disaster for the king. People saw him as a traitor, abandoning them when they needed him most.
Trust is gone. And things are about to get even more radical.
Add to that, France declares war on Austria in 1792, partly because they're afraid Austria will try to put the king back on the throne. And Louis, seen as pro-Austria, becomes the perfect scapegoat for everything going wrong with the war.
So we've got a broke country, a king nobody believes in, revolutionary ideas spreading, and now a war. Talk about setting the stage for chaos.
Oh yeah, this is just the beginning.
Where does it go from here? We'll find out in part 2 of our deep dive into the French Revolution. Last time we left France, well, kind of a mess. Revolution's going, war's coming, and the king, not exactly popular anymore. So what happens next?
Buckle up. Things get intense, fast. September 1792, monarchy's out, bam, France is a republic. Big experiment in doing things themselves, no more kings.
Bold move. But I bet it wasn't smooth sailing from there. Internal problems, external threats, the whole shebang.
You got it. And then, January 21st, 1793, King Louis, he loses his head. Executed for treason, shocks all of Europe.
Whoa. A king killed by his own people. That's a statement.
Totally unprecedented, like symbolically cutting off the past, no more absolute power, but it also divides people even more in France and scares other monarchs silly. They don't want the same thing happening to them.
Yeah, I can imagine. So this sets the stage for one of the darkest periods, right? The Reign of Terror. What can you tell us about that?
No. Well, it's brutal. 1793 to 1794. Extreme violence, political crackdowns, the works. The Jacobins, they're the radical group in charge, led by Robespierre. Their idea is to save the revolution, you got to get rid of any white threat, real or imagined.
Yeah, our sources, they don't hold back. It's chilling. Guillotines working overtime, thousands executed for crimes against the state, often without real proof. How did it get so bad?
Lots of reasons. War with other countries is making everyone paranoid. Jacobins use that fear to grab more power. They set up these tribunals, basically kangaroo courts, skipping the whole legal process. Bad news for anyone they don't like.
It's like the revolution eats its own, you know? One of the sources talks about Olympe de Gouges, playwright, activist. She was all for the revolution at first, big on women's rights. But then she starts criticizing the Jacobins, saying they're hypocrites for not giving women equality.
Yeah, de Gouges, she's a tragic figure. Sticks to her principles, even when it's dangerous. And in 1793, they arrest her, execute her too, called her an enemy of the revolution.
Wow. A revolution supposed to be about freedom ends up silencing dissent. It's a reminder that good intentions can go very, very wrong.
Absolutely. The terror doesn't end until Robespierre himself gets a taste of the guillotine in 94. Finally, things calm down a bit. France is exhausted, traumatized, and they enter this new phase under the Directory.
Okay, so the Directory, they were supposed to be more moderate, right? Like, let's chill out after all that craziness. But I'm guessing they had their work cut out for them.
Oh, for sure. Try and keep order, fix a broken economy, with all these political factions still fighting each other, plus the war's still dragging on, costing them money and lives. The Directory leaned heavily on the military to stay in control, and that's going to come back to bite them.
And that brings us to Napoleon, the big name everyone knows.
Right, Napoleon. Brilliant general, super ambitious. He rises up through all this chaos, wins battles, people love him, but he also sees how weak the Directory is, and he's not going to let that opportunity pass him by.
November 9th, 1799, boom, coup d'etat, Directory's out, Napoleon's in, first consul, game over for the French Revolution as they imagined it.
It's a huge GE shift. Napoleon says he's all about the revolution's ideals, but pretty quickly it's a dictatorship. He centralizes power, starts conquering half of Europe.
So the revolution that starts with liberty, equality, fraternity ends with an emperor. What a ride. But before we get to Napoleon's story, we got to go back to something we mentioned before. Women in all this.
Right. Can't forget them. They were there every step of the way, fighting, rioting, organizing, but never getting the same rights they were demanding for everyone else.
Like Olympe de Gouges, fighting for her version of equality. Who were some of the other women? What were they doing?
Oh, they were everywhere. You had women in those bread riots, at the Bastille, even forming their own political clubs, pushing for their rights.
Yeah, the Society of Revolutionary Republican Women, right?
Yeah.
They wanted it all. Voting, carrying guns, being in government, the works.
They weren't messing around. Saw this revolution as a chance to remake the whole system. Women not just equal, but in charge, making the decisions too.
But not everyone was on board with that. I mean, a lot of the men, even the revolutionaries, A&D, the conservatives, they thought women should stick to, being wives and moms, stay home, leave politics to the guys.
Yeah, classic. That's the struggle, isn't it? Huge changes happening, but those old ideas about gender roles, they die hard. It's all over this period.
So even though women were right there in the thick of it, demanding equality, they didn't get those full rights during the revolution. What happened?
Well, a few things. The government's got wars, internal fights, they're kind of busy. Radical change for women's rights. Not high on the to-do list.
And I bet some guys were just plain scared. Giving women power, that's messing with the whole social order, right?
Oh, absolutely. Some sources say they thought women were too emotional for politics, easily manipulated. Classic patriarchal thinking, of course. But also, these revolutionaries, they're thinking strategically. Maybe women's rights can wait. Got to focus on the bigger picture, win the war, all that.
So the revolution's about universal rights, but, well, that wasn't so universal for women. Kind of a letdown.
It is, but it's not the end of the story. Those women, Olympe de Gouges, the society, they planted a seed. Later feminists, they picked up that torch, kept fighting. Eventually, it leads to real change in France, all over.
It's amazing how history connects, right? Those early struggles are still relevant to what's going on today.
Hmm.
Seems like the French Revolution, even with its flaws, still speaks to people who want a fairer world.
No doubt. It's a powerful symbol, that desire for freedom, equality, having a say in your own life. The legacy's mixed, sure, good and bad. But it shows us even the most powerful systems can be challenged. People working together, they can change things.
So, looking back on it all, we've seen it all. The crazy monarchy, the revolutionary ideals, the violence, the hope, Napoleon rising up, just wow.
It makes you think, doesn't it? The French Revolution, it's about the power of ideas, how they can completely upend the world. Change is messy, unpredictable, but it's always there, part of being human.
Makes you wonder, how do those grand ideals, how do they actually play out in the real world? How do you fight for freedom without becoming a tyrant yourself? What can we learn from this for our own time?
Those are the questions, right, for all of us to think about. The French Revolution, it's both inspiring and a warning. It reminds us building a better world, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You got to keep going, keep questioning, never stop pushing for what's right.